Hi, I'm Alex, and I'm going to be showing you some of my books. Today we're going to talk about Star Wars books. Not so much the novels and fiction books that have been published over the years as Expanded Universe or Legacies or whatever, because let's be honest, those books all kind of suck. So we're just going to cover books that are directly related to the movies here. We're going to start with the crown jewel of my collection, the Star Wars annotated screenplays. And this goes over the first 3 movies in the series, and it was very meticulously researched with early drafts and rough sketches and treatments for all 3 of those movies. The first one is especially weird. There's all kinds of crazy stuff that didn't make it in. At one point, Obi-Wan Kenobi force chokes a bunch of people. Other strange things happen. In Return of the Jedi, Obi-Wan Kenobi comes back from the dead to help Luke defeat the Emperor. It's pretty wild. And you can also see some of the concepts that Lucas had really early on that he ended up using much later. It's also notable that in the first movie, all of the really funny lines were actually written by Gloria Katz and Willard Huyck. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly or not. This book is out of print. It's a real shame. It goes for like $100 now, so I'm real happy to have it. Along similar lines, we have this one, The Making of Star Wars. Back when I was a kid, the first movie in the series was just called Star Wars. We didn't refer to it as A New Hope or Episode 4. They didn't come up with that idea until a little later. And fittingly, this book is just called The Making of Star Wars. And it covers Star Wars from its first appearance in George Lucas's brain all the way through post-production. There's a lot of great images in here of the concept art and the production art and behind the scenes stuff. And there's interviews with everybody who was involved pretty much. And if you want this, I recommend the hardcover edition because it has a whole big extra section in the back which features storyboards and a lot of other things. And what I think is most interesting is there's a bit where Lucas was giving background information on some of the characters and concepts for people to use in what became Expanded Universe, comics and novels and things. And for the most part, they're pretty different from what we ended up seeing on screen later. But there are a few interesting bits. For example, C-3PO gets disassembled and then reassembled as a kit by a small boy. Also, the concept of midi-chlorians was in George Lucas's head way back in 1977. So you may hate that, most people do, but it's not something new that he came up with. There's also a line in there where Lucas explains that Chewbacca did not get a medal at the end of Star Wars because Wookiees don't care about that sort of thing. And he got an honor on his own planet later. So if anybody ever brings that up again, you can tell them that George Lucas said Chewbacca didn't get a medal because he didn't really want one. Now I've got art of books for all 3 of the Star Wars prequels. We have The Phantom Menace. This one's in paperback, and I don't know if they ever made a hardcover. It's actually the making of The Phantom Menace, but it does have a lot of concept art and that sort of thing in it. It's probably the best that I could get at that time. I'm not sure if they put out an actual art of for this film. I do have the art of Attack of the Clones. This one is my favorite of the art of books because it also includes the entire screenplay for the film. Now, Attack of the Clones is not known to be the Star Wars movie with the best screenplay, but it's kind of cool to have that screenplay there to look at and read if you'd like, along with all the awesome concept art, as usual. Also, Art of Revenge of the Sith. This one does not have a screenplay in the back. It's just your standard making of / art of book, but it's pretty cool if you like Revenge of the Sith, and so many of you do. I've also got some art of or making of or visual dictionary books for some of the non-mainline Star Wars projects. I've got the Art of Rogue One and also the Rogue One Visual Dictionary. You might think I'm a huge Rogue One fan, but the Visual Dictionary one was actually a gift, a nice gift. And they're both handsome volumes, as always. The Art of Solo. Solo's getting a bit of a reevaluation lately, which I think is good. It's my opinion that Solo captures the magic of those first 3 Star Wars movies better than any of the other Disney films. It's fun, it's an adventure. It doesn't take itself too seriously. There are a few cringy moments, but overall, I think it's one of the best. This volume is a little lacking in that it barely mentions the fact that the original directors were Lord and Miller, who were replaced by Ron Howard. Seeing some of the original Lord and Miller era concept art and comparing it to Ron Howard's and explaining why the changes were made would be a lot more educational for everybody. But I guess Disney didn't want to put that there was any sort of friction in the making of the film, even though we all know it. Here we have The Art of the Mandalorian. That's from season 1. I'm sure they made volumes for the other seasons and maybe even for the other TV shows, but really I'm not all that interested in that. At some point, your mind gets a little numb with the vast amount of content. Now, the sequels. Nothing controversial about these films at all. Start with The Art of the Force Awakens. No matter what you think of the movie, there's a lot of really interesting concepts in here. I especially like the designs for the Knights of Ren and Kylo Ren himself. And it gives a little insight into the thought process as they were making that film. The Last Jedi. I like this movie, mostly. As an art of book, it's not nearly as interesting. I feel like most of the really cool designs were conceived of for the previous movie, so there's not as much to work with here. But there are some interesting things to look at. And now we come to Rise of Skywalker. I had a little tradition. When I'd watch these new Disney Star Wars movies, I'd go to the theater and I'd watch the movie, and then I'd go down to the nearest Barnes & Noble and I'd pick up the Art of book. That's why I have all those in my collection. Rise of Skywalker didn't have an Art of book. I don't know why. I suspect it's because J.J. Abrams rewrote and reconceptualized the whole thing, taking over from the original director. So what I bought instead was the Visual Dictionary, which has a lot of cool concepts and illustrations. It does not cover the Sith planet Exegol at all. I guess they wanted to keep it as spoiler-free as possible, but it makes the book less interesting. They did eventually publish an Art of Rise of Skywalker book, and I looked at it, and I didn't like it, so I didn't buy it. A few other fun odds and ends. Here is the Star Wars Storybook. And if you were a kid in the 1970s or the early 1980s, you couldn't just put on Star Wars whenever you wanted to watch the movie. So you had to make do with things like the Star Wars Storybook, or the comic books, or the novel if you were able to read the novel. But it was the best we could do to get our Star Wars fix when we couldn't just watch the movie at any time. And finally, a couple of educational books about Star Wars. Here we have the Star Wars Question and Answer book about space. And that is a book in which C-3PO and R2-D2 teach children all about space exploration and space travel and astronomy. And it came from Scholastic Books, so it was probably purchased at a book fair or something. Mine has a Empire Strikes Back informational poster that I stuck inside. And another educational book, Star Wars, Where Science Meets Imagination. And this was a museum tie-in book that covers the science behind some of the science fiction in Star Wars. Robots and spaceships and all that sort of thing. So those are my Star Wars books. Hope it wasn't too boring. If you don't think it was too boring, you can like and subscribe. That's what they say you should say at the end of these YouTube videos. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.